Good evening and welcome to our continuing coverage of the fighting that's broken out in the Middle East, the war in the Middle East as it appears, with Iran's counter strikes to the US and Israel strikes there in Iran. Now, Iran has vowed its quote-unquote most ferocious strike on US and Israel bases after the elimination of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And now the Gulf is feeling the heat. Explosions echoed across the West Asian region. Dubai in United Arab Emirates, Doha in Qatar, and Manama in Bahrain, all countries that host US military bases amongst many others. Now, there are several concerning visuals that have emerged from these countries. Let's take a quick look at some of the top developments that are taking place. There is Ayatollah Arafi, who's assumed the temporary charge. Iran has targeted UK bases in Middle East. Iranian projectiles have hit mediator, in this case, that is Oman. Khamenei dead is what Iran is saying, and it has vowed blood vengeance. Now, Iran has warned the biggest strike coming yet, and we've seen that Israel has dropped around 1,200 bombs on Iran. Israel hits Iran's Joint Chief of Staff headquarters, and reports state that Iran's state TV office also has been hit. Khamenei killed is what we are seeing on ground, and the tremors are now being felt in Pakistan, where the US consulate has been impacted. In fact, we are seeing the UN office also being set on fire by a Pakistani mob. In Pakistan, 10 people have been killed as cops have been attacked by unruly mob as well. So those are some of the developments coming in at the moment. In fact, the latest development coming in at the moment is about Russian President Vladimir Putin. He's expressed his condolences to Pezeshkian over the assassination of Supreme Leader of Islamic Republic of Iran, Sayyid Ali Khamenei. In fact, we've seen how the Russian president has described Ayatollah Khamenei's death as a cynical murder that violated all norms of human morality and international law. Let's quickly take this across to our guest. Joining us here in the studio is the Air Vice Marshal, retired PK Srivastav. We have Lieutenant Shankar Prasad, the defense analyst, joining us. We also have Murzeen Wagmar from the Center of Iranian Studies, that is of SOAS, University of London. Also joining us on the broadcast, Dr. Doron Avital, who's an ex-commander of Israel's elite special forces, that is Sayeret Matkal. We have the former member of Knesset and a former Foreign Security Committee member as well. We have Dr. John Harrison, who's a Homeland Security expert, also joining us on the show. Let's quickly begin with what's happening, around the neighborhood. Murzeen, let me come across to you. The kind of impact that this has had across the Middle East, we are seeing protests break out in Pakistan as well, and the attacks on the US consulate, UN offices, etc. in different parts. But clearly, what is quite unexpected is the manner and the impact and how civilian targets appear to have been hit in places such as Dubai. Is there a larger message being sent out that we can attack and take out even the biggest commercial nerve centers that impact the entire globe? Do you think that's the message that is being sent out, or is it restricted to just the US bases and US companies?
No, it is a scattergun approach by a desperate, beleaguered, embattled regime, which is practically on its last legs. A regime on borrowed time in more ways than one. So it is unsurprising in the least, and I expected this, including civilian casualties. So we will have to ride it out. Yes, there will be problems in upcoming. And of course, the typical Arab or Muslim street will be enraged. That too will be factored in, and we'll have to ride it out. I've been hearing all this nonsense from Qasem Soleimani's time and even before, but this is all par for the course. And maybe this might be a moment for Dubai, particularly to realize with its turning a Nelson's eye to Iranian investments and the rest of it, compared to Abu Dhabi, the capital, and Sharjah, the other emirate, and Ras Al Khaimah, who have always taken a more urge for a more stronger position towards Tehran. So maybe this is a moment for Dubai to reckon with, so to speak.
Right.
Bahrain, of course, is reeling under it, as we know. But what I want to say is that the job needs to be finished. We don't have a Delcy Rodriguez in Tehran, and fat chance there's going to be one by the end of the week too. But President Trump and Israel need to finish the job in more ways than one. And as he rightly put it yesterday, this is a lifetime's opportunity to take out a homicidal Islamic regime that has hobbled the Iranian people for 47 years and made living hell for all its Arab world GCC allies. So we will see things happening with Kurdish outfits and Baloch outfits already mentioning that they are going to be on board as a moral force with the protesters who are already out on the streets. And in fact, were out on the streets exactly last Saturday when the first commemoration took place of the 40 days anniversary of those who died, when distraught relatives were commemorating it. And make no mistake, it is this commemorative cycle in Shia millenarian Islam that will play a critical mass in building further opposition towards an embattled, discredited regime. Because it is exactly what happened in 78-79 when these 40-day momentum commemorations built up, which led to the Shah's departure in Jan 79.
All right, and there's of course a descendant of the Shah who's now, you know, a lot of talk about him coming in and replacing this regime. But is it really going to be that easy? Let me bring in Dr. Doron Avital. Dr. Doron Avital, you know, this entire talk about replacing the regime says that they are prepared, that there are several of those who could be potential successors, and that they have a plan and a scheme in place because they've been preparing for this for quite some time. If you look at the severity of the attack, if you look at the kind of support coming in, for instance, Vladimir Putin calling Khamenei's killing a cynical murder. He is saying that this violates global law. What are we looking at in the possible support that Iran not just is getting diplomatically, but otherwise also from, for instance, Russia and even China for that matter?
Yeah, exactly. This is uncharted territories, and the role that China and Russia would have a key role. The question is whether there's enough momentum inside the society that would topple the regime and there would be a regime change as we all want or expect, or is in the end is the purpose of this campaign. But of course, we shouldn't undermine the possibility of consideration of the hardliners and creating there would be a hardliners taking position. This is another option that I wouldn't undermine the probability of this happening. But of course, the other option, if not momentum, fragmentation of Iran in unrest, problem of supervision of their nuclear material, that the enriched material, there would be, there are like at least 3 venues ahead. I don't think transition of power, smooth transition of power is to be expected. We have to watch out what's coming up.
All right, let me quickly bring in some breaking news as well. Iranian media are citing a military source to report that hypersonic missile, ballistic missile at that Fateh 2 has been deployed by Iran for the first time. This is the latest update coming in from Iranian media sources that Fateh 2 ballistic missile has been deployed. Let me quickly take this across to Lieutenant General Shankar Prasad. Lieutenant General Shankar Prasad, what does this really mean? We've seen Iran, for instance, yesterday come out and say that they don't have an ICBM to take out the United States. But when it comes to Fateh 2, what does this really mean, and what all can it potentially target within its range?
Well, it certainly is a potent weapon, and it could create some kind of damage into the overall plan of the Israeli and the American forces. But let me also say this, that the counter to this is also available. There are certain measures which the Israelis and the Americans have developed in the form of neutralizing or by cyber warfare, suppressing this particular kind of a missile by certain jamming procedures. That may also not happen. But the fact is, yes, your question is very relevant, that this could create another very important damage to the forces that are attacking. But the important point today is different. The important point today is this, as some of the previous speakers have said in your previous program, the complete air superiority is a major achievement. Besides having removed the Ayatollah and killed a large number of senior military and IRGC officers, the regime change issue is a more important issue at the moment. Of course, the weaponries will keep coming in, and also you can hear another particular weapon which the Americans haven't yet shown, or at least we haven't come to know of it, a particular aircraft which is called 11 F-25 or 22 Raptor, which is an aircraft which clears the pathways of all the aircraft that go and neutralizes all communication systems and all everything that goes to air, clearing a clean path. This could be a very potent weapon which hasn't yet been deployed, it seems, but it is stationed in Israel for the last week or so. So the question arises that yes, there There are actions and there are anti-actions to it available in the terms of science and technology. But the bigger issue again remains that has the American forces achieved their objective? Yes, they have. 50% of it. 50% of it that the leader has been removed and a new leader is going to come up. The new leader can come out from the clergy as well as from the outside the clergy. Now that is something that time will tell. But clergy, who gets the support of clergy? The clergy gets the support or its strength from the Iranian revolutionary force. Has that force been weakened? So our next question should be, what will be the future targets that the Americans and the Israelis are going to target?
Right.
Obviously, those people in the revolutionary force who are really kingmakers to be eliminated, military to be eliminated, and at the same time encourage the local population. So this is a dynamic of political battle and a dynamic of information battle and a dynamics of clergy versus the people who've been persecuted in Iran for a long time. There is large population. And yet if you see the number of facilities that the battle groups of the aircraft carriers are available with haven't been fully utilized or at least haven't come into the fore. So very potential, very serious weaponry is still available to cause major destruction. I think that the sagacity of the operation would be to ask for a limited kind of a ceasefire, if you can call it, before Iran also becomes Ukraine. We don't want Iran to become Ukraine, and I'm sure neither the Iranians want it, nor the rest of the world wants it.
Absolutely.
So the answer is that yes, regime change 50%, yes, certain amount of damage has been caused to the nuclear capabilities also. The senior most nuclear scientist, who is the director or the advisor of the leader of the government, has also been eliminated, and perhaps more scientists have been eliminated, we don't know, or on the target. So even though the actual uranium may not have been stuck, but the people who run it have been damaged.
All right.
So
let me bring in Dr. John Harrison on that note. Dr. John Harrison, we've seen this morning both the United States and Iran hardening their positions. It appears that this fighting is going to be spiraling out, beyond what we were initially imagining yesterday, that it could be a limited war. Now, while Lieutenant General Shankar Prasad says that both sides should talk in terms of a ceasefire, the rhetoric doesn't really support that, because it appears that both sides are preparing for a longer haul war. How do you see things playing out in the next few days?
Well, I think both the Americans and the Israelis had said before the strikes even started that this was going to be, this phase of the campaign was going to be about 4 or 5 days, and then there might be a pause at that point to evaluate what targets might be left and to do a more thorough damage assessment. But the conflict has already escalated because of how Iran has chosen to respond. My wife and I were actually in Dubai last night. We live in Abu Dhabi, and the targeting last night and throughout the day today has been largely civilian targets. So, Iran may or may not be hardening its rhetoric, but you've got to remember that from the UAE's perspective, the Emiratis had many members of the GCC had said that they were not going to allow their bases to be used for these operations, and Iran still chose to strike these countries. And the U.S. has not used any of these facilities. So, it seems like, while I would agree with one of your earlier guests who said that Iran is, whether it is at the moment or not, it certainly is acting as if this is an existential threat to its survival. Certainly the removal of the senior leadership would reinforce that. So Iran is doing what a nation would do when they feel as if there is nothing left for them to do. They're going to strike out at whoever and whatever they can. So the escalation at this point would seem to be from the Iranian side. If they would stop targeting non-combatant targets, if they would stick to military targets, you might be able to come up with a solution where there could be some talk. But I think both the Americans and the Israelis reached the point at the end of last week that it seemed like this was going to be, the negotiations were going to be Iran Jacopa 2.0, where Iran has been very good at sort of extending negotiations past the point where anybody would logically seem to get anything out of it. And I think both the United States and Israel had thought that that point was reached at the end of the week.
All right, and there's more breaking news coming in at the moment. The Iranian military has published footage of preparations by the Iranian Air Force for takeoff to carry out strikes against U.S. bases and assets in the Gulf region. This is, of course, the latest video coming in of strike preps that are coming in from Iran side. Now, there's a lot of saber rattling happening in the midst of that. Iran trying to project an image of strength and capability as far as its Air Force is concerned. Let me quickly take this across to Air Vice Marshal P.K. Srivastav. How do you look at this? Of course, it's not uncommon during war to create this kind of a messaging of capabilities of various forces, and that appears to be what Iran is doing. However, the larger question is whether the US and, of course, the bases that are there throughout Middle East will be able to repel these strikes and these attempts coming in from Iran's side. Air Vice Marshal.
Madhav, as far as this video is concerned, it's more or less part of a propaganda. They want to do some kind of information or some messaging to their own population. They're still there and we have a force. But the way they are, conducting the war, if you look at the conduct of the war, it is in no way a military planned kind of war, because they are hitting civilian targets. They are hitting anywhere and wherever they want. They even hit Oman, which was trying to mediate between them and the US and Israeli establishment. So it's not a kind of planned thing. It's not a military kind of thing. And we can understand that, why it is not there. With the leadership eliminated and the joint headquarters gone, and communications are already, I presume, they're already jammed or they're already disturbed, so they don't have any proper communication. All the units which are there, the missile units, primarily they have only missile power with them. The units are probably more or less autonomous. That must be one of the protocols. So nobody knows where to hit. And the air dominance of US and Israeli forces over the Iranian airspace is complete and total. They want to hit wherever they want to hit. And they have the targeting information. Unless you have the intelligence, human intelligence on ground, there's no way you can eliminate 40 IRGC commanders and all the top leadership. You have to know where are they. Of course, there'll be support of satellite intelligence. There'll be support of electronic intelligence, information, IW intelligence. But all that combined, the human intelligence layer has to come for this kind of precise and accurate strike, which has happened. That means we take it for granted that Mossad and CIA already embedded in the system, whether it's IRGC or other establishments. So with all that, the fighting capability of Iranian forces is already in a way decimated to a degree that they can attack this kind of desperation, some points here and there. But the moment you talked about Fateh 2, that's a matter of concern, because Fateh 2 is one missile which has a range about 1,500 kilometers or so. But it is a hypersonic missile which has precision, very high precision, and also it is a maneuverable missile. That means engaging with the help of THAAD, Arrow 3, or David Sling, or Iron Dome, or Iron Beam would become a challenge. So if it leaks through the tiers of air defense and falls in some territory which is a meaningful target, it can create some degree of chaos for Israel. But as far as US mainland is concerned, there's no way they can attack that. It doesn't have that reach. So the concern is, with this coming out, they're trying to send a message that please open the back channels. We are ready to talk. This is more of that kind of posting than really firing it. Because I'm pretty sure with all the system being in place, even this hypersonic missile, we do not know what else they got into it, but as per the last what we had read and we know about it, it will not be able to penetrate meaningfully through the tiers, those layers of air defense.
Right.
So keeping that in mind, this is a kind of posturing you're trying to tell through strength, your weakness. You're trying to tell, we are there, we can still fight, but if you do back channel talks with us, we are there. And in this context, Madhav, I'll share one more thing. Mr. Arafi, who's the foreign minister, is very relevant in this whole discourse, because he doesn't belong to, it's not Arafi. Arafi is the new one. The foreign minister I'm talking about.
Arakchi, sir.
Arakchi.
Yeah.
Arakchi is very relevant because he's one of the moderates within the establishment. So is he, and he's not talking anything as of now. Yesterday he talked something about, he was on US television channels, but today he's very quiet. So why is he quiet? What kind of things are going on?
Are you saying there's negotiation happening? Are you saying
some negotiations are there?
So the back channels are open. That's what you're essentially saying. The back channels are open. There's all attempts at trying to arrive. Of course, there were talks even before the strikes happened. And of course, Oman playing a key role over there. But Burzine, the point being made over here is this. what are the options that Iran really has? If we talk about the stockpile of weapons, etc., Iran has a very limited stockpile. For all the bravado of saying that, yes, we are much better prepared, we have a huge stockpile, for all the attacks that they've launched on the UAE, for instance, which is just across the Straits of Hormuz, how far is Iran prepared to take this further? More than a few days would be very difficult for them to sustain.
But they will do so because of this apocalyptic millenarian Shia vision that despite losing, they cannot counter or compromise on their core ideology and sovereignty. That is why Khamenei died, and the talks were forestalled because Iran did not go into the talks going with a sense of compromise, which some of the reformists would have wanted, because the hardliners have cornered them in more ways than one. And to pick up what the two forces gentlemen said, if I could come from Iranian studies on that, Iran's air force is antiquated. Air Marshal Shrivastava, they still have those F-4 Phantoms from the late 70s and early 80s, which tells you how abysmal the fleet is in more ways than one. Point number one. And point number two, you have to also remember Iran with the Pakistan analogy. By that, I mean it's the Pak Army and GHQ Rawalpindi who calls the shots. Replace that with the Revolutionary Guards, because the tri-services, Air Marshal Shrivastava, the professional armed forces have no say in any matter. Right. They have been cornered and been contained over the last 47 years by this parallel units of the IRGC, Navy, Air Force and Army, who are Islamically compatible and ideologically okayed by the regime, and they have always overshadowed the professional services. So the professional services, like Pakistan's foreign service and civil service, do what they are told. They are the state within the state that one will have to deal with. And in dealing with that, Madhav, here's the point. Most of the IRGC are millionaires and venal oligarchs. One can bank upon this, and I'm not being too optimistic, but my point is they can be peeled away. As Trump mentioned, that if you were to lay down your arms and not shoot your population and come over the other side, there is compromise to be seen in that context, because not the entire cadre of the IRGC, Madhav, is of the 1980s Iran-Iraq war suicide mentality generation. That generation has died out. They're not all doctrinaire hardliners. They've all settled into businesses. And Ali Larijani, for instance, whose wife died yesterday in the attacks, and who's taking a strong position now on the Security Council, National Security Council, and the rest of it, he has funneled millions out in the last 2 weeks into his hush accounts into Dubai and Singapore. So they are corrupt and venal to the core, and we must attempt to wean them away. And that will be one aspect in the playbook of DC and Jerusalem. No question about it.
Let me bring in Doron Avital on that note. Dr. Doron Avital, the question that many are asking is this. Of course, in Iran, it is the IRGC that controls everything. As our previous speaker, Burzin, said, the professional forces are, of course, subservient to that extent to what the IRGC orders. But the larger question is that, can an effective regime change happen unless there is some kind of a ground offensive? What's the likelihood of that happening? Because with these airstrikes, there's only so much that can be done.
I don't see any ground offensive in the future. I do see special forces. It may be in the north, maybe in some kind of context, Mossad operatives and special forces, maybe also the US, but no ground offensive in the sense that we talk about. I want to show you what happened in Hezbollah in Lebanon. We hardly made any ground offensive in our borders, and we succeeded to topple Hezbollah. So I think that the objective of this campaign is really, in an engineering way, to pinpoint the weak point of the structure and let the structure collapse. And for example, the wedge between the military forces and the Revolutionary Guards may be a very nice wedge to try to play it out. And I think for sure the people that run this campaign are doing that. I would add also that it's very clear that you talked about bravado and about the rhetorics of the Iranian regime, the huge gap between the rhetorics of their capabilities and the capabilities shown, and this orientation in their strategy indicates the weakness of the regime. And I think this is where the campaign would aim in the end, to dismantle the regime.
Right. And in fact, there's some more updates coming in at the moment. North Korea has said that attacks on Iran are a violation of national sovereignty. That's the first response coming in from North Korea, calling these attacks on Iran as a violation of national sovereignty. No surprises there officially, of course, for that statement coming in, given the kind of responses that have been coming in from other countries as well. But let me bring in Dr. John Harrison on this. Dr. John Harrison, a question that many are asking is that there are, of course, leave aside what Russia, China, North Korea are saying, but there are serious questions also coming in from other players such as the European Union, who called for a meeting on Monday. And what they are also, of course, concerned about is the entire issue of regime change and the manner in which things have actually happened.
Yes, well, I think it's also demonstrating sort of the weakness of the EU at the moment. That this is an emergency situation, and they're putting the meeting off until Monday. It seems to sort of recall the old Yes Prime Minister episode where Bernard Woolley said NATO would prefer a war between to happen Monday to Friday during business hours. So I mean, it's unfortunately highlighting kind of the weakness of the international system here. But while publicly governments may not like it, I think privately there are a number of governments that would probably be happy with results that ended quickly. There is going to be no ground offensive, so I think that's going to make the Europeans certainly happy. But the Iranian regime has spent almost 50 years destabilizing the region. They have conducted operations in Europe itself. So this is not Switzerland of the Middle East by any stretch of the imagination. So that it's better for the Middle East in the long run, or West Asia, pardon me, in the long run, that you get a regime. It doesn't have to be pro-American or pro-Israeli. It has to be pro-peace. And if that means that they're not going to try to overthrow governments in Bahrain, in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, that's fine. I think I think there is a great deal of scope for a nation that doesn't have to align perfectly with everyone else. But the core issue is that if you want to influence another nation, you do it not by undermining it, but by working with it. And Iran has certainly taken what many would say would be the sort of the cheap way out by trying to undermine states through proxies. And if you change that, you open up the whole region to an enormous potential for economic development and for a whole change in the fundamental security environment. So it's a huge gamble. But if it pays off, and there's no promises in anything in life,
right?
But if it pays off, this has an enormous possibility for profound change. And if the European Union wants to get involved in helping to try to steer a future where Iran can be a productive member of the international community, that's great.
Right. And in fact, let me bring in little Shankar Prasad on that. Are you looking at this as some kind of a strategic move in terms of attacking ports? Because from Dubai to Oman, that's one common factor in terms of the targets that have been chosen.
I personally feel that it's a very immature action on the part of the Iranis to do this. They're only creating more enemies around them. After all, UAE is a very neutral country. It's flourishing in business. Even Iran is doing massive business and investments in Dubai. I think it's a bit of a immature action, as I would put it. But I want to make another important point, Madhav. We spoke about the troops on ground or the boots on ground. What exactly do we mean by boots on ground? Do we really mean infantry going there, or the armored corps or the tanks going there? No, I would put it differently. I would say that isn't there sufficient number of intelligence organizations on foot, human intelligence, working inside Iran? Well, I also say, and you must be aware of the fact better than I do, that some months ago, maybe 3 months ago, there were some intelligence reports to say that some special forces have been inducted, have been infiltrated into Iran, and who are not only giving information, but are also creating pockets of resistance or pockets of support.
Right.
These are Israeli troops. These are regular troops. Don't wear uniform, perhaps. Don't wear boots on the ground, as you typically say. So, yes, at the end of it, human part is an important part. It doesn't necessarily mean a rifleman to go there.
Okay.
There are people there inside who are supporters, who may be background of military, who may not be background of military, but intelligence background, manipulative people who can...
So a lot more than meets the eye in terms of what could be happening and what the resources are that could be pressed into service. I'm going to request all of you gentlemen to just stay on with us. We're going to slip into a very quick break and then our continuing coverage of the war that's clearly not over in the Middle East. Stay tuned.